Good morning and welcome to this, our first webinar on the Masterclass series. And this particular webinar, we'll be talking about the 5 steps to a world-class contact center. So to those of you who've joined us today, welcome. And let's get the show rolling straight away, shall we? Right, 5 steps to a world-class contact center. Let's take a look at where it comes from. Well, over 40 years that I've been active in the contact center industry, both here in South Africa and elsewhere in the world, I've developed a number of modules and training programs and executive development programs to assist organizations to optimize their customer experience. A lot of the material comes from my contact center masterclass seminars that we've been running for nearly 15 years now. And I've run about 125 seminars and 4,800 delegates in 13 countries. And the next one is taking place right here in Johannesburg on the 29th and 30th of July. If you'd like more information about it, please either message me or email me and we'll gladly send it along. There on the right-hand side, you see a copy of the masterclass brochure or pamphlet. You'll see on the left-hand column there, those are the topics that I work through with the delegates over the 2 days of the masterclass. We call it operational excellence, and it really is contact center best practice guidelines. And we cover a huge amount of information, and most delegates leave very excited, very motivated about the prospect of running a world-class contact center. I see we have another delegate that's joined us. Thank you very much. And I've only just started, so reviewing the masterclass series. So welcome to this webinar. So there's your masterclass seminar, and this particular module that we'll be talking about today comes from that seminar. So gladly send you more information about that. All right, there are 5 steps or 5 processes that we need to look at in this quest to become a world-class contact center. And it may sound silly, but why do we do what we are doing in our contact center? So we really need to ask ourselves that. Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? We often find when we're auditing call centers that a lot of resources are totally wasted in the contact center because there's a misalignment between what the operation is doing and what the boardroom expects us to do. Of course, we need to ask that next question about how well are we doing in our operations, and then what are we doing right and what are we doing wrong? And here's a classic SWOT analysis. If we're really good at something, let's do more of it. And if we're not so good, let's find out what we need to do to rectify that matter. And how do we fix the problems and optimize our strengths? And these are really important. And we'll come on to that a little bit later in terms of how we monitor and measure it. So they're your 5-step processes. And let's take it to the next level. This particular slide I've been using for almost 10 years now, and nothing seems to change. These, what we call the key operational challenges. And you can almost hear the words coming down from the boardroom to the call center or contact center operations team. Reduce the cost of operations. Everybody cost savings in mind as we look at our operations. Secondly, increase efficiencies. Contact centers are notoriously seen as cost centers and as inefficient operations. If we just look at the average staff turnover in call centers, it's small wonder that the executives see us as being inefficient. Increase revenues. It's the magic that makes the world go round. Whether it is sales, whether it is customer retention, whether it is debt recovery, revenue is what it's all about, and we need to drive for that. Risks. A few years ago, risks were merely business and financial risks. And today, of course, contact center plays a major role in mitigating risks or can be the source of high risk in the context of social media, where brand and reputational damage can play a major role. And then, of course, customer satisfaction, however we measure that, is driving that onwards and upwards, whether it is customer experience, customer satisfaction, customer lifetime value. Those are all the things we need to do. So there are 5 key challenges. But as we know, we have a headcount freeze, we probably have a CapEx freeze, we have an IT spend freeze, we have budgets being cut all over the place. And so we need to do a whole lot more with a lot less in the way of resources. At the same time, we cannot begin to think about compromising on quality. So those 5 key challenges will underpin everything else we'll be talking about in this particular seminar. So a certified world-class contact center or call center. What is it? How do we get there? Well, as you can see on that particular slide, the integration and operational maturity is the one driver, and the strategic alignment is the second driver. So if we take that in its context, we start building on this as a model. With the best will in the world, a brand new call center, no matter how much money we might have spent on it, is still foundational. As people are finding their way, they are starting to develop better processes, becoming more better trained in the operation. And so we have the first level of any contact center is foundational. As it matures, we call it a fundamental contact center. We have more details about how we arrive at these definitions, and I'll be giving you some more reference material on that towards the end of this 30-minute webinar. We then reach a developing phase where the contact center is really starting to perform well and is starting to meet its objectives. And then a mature call center or contact center is right up at that level. Ultimately is a world-class contact center. And so what we need to do is to find out where are we, where's your call center on this particular journey. It's somewhere between foundational and world-class. And we'll come on to that shortly as to how we get there. So what does it take to be a world-class contact center? First and foremost, it needs strategic alignment, as I've mentioned before, the alignment of the operation in terms of what the organization as a whole is looking for. And we'll be dealing with compliance and standards, and I'll expand on that in a few moments, and benchmarking. So 3 components that make up the world-class contact center. So let's go to it here. First, strategic alignment. So the organization as a whole, the good people in the boardroom are looking ahead. They're looking at the mission, the objectives, the tactics of the organization, the strategies of the organization. How sure are we that our contact center is totally aligned with what's happening in the boardroom? And so we need to be on track and put in place whatever processes, communication channels are necessary to make sure that at all times, as tactics and strategies might change in the boardroom, the contact center is there to respond as quickly as possible to those changes. So is the contact center aligned in supporting core business strategies and the operations? And there's a whole methodology that we use to cross-check that and to ensure that the contact center is aligned at all stages. So when we come to auditing the contact center, this is one of the things we look at very carefully. The second is the most complicated part of this, and this is compliance with standards and KPIs. Now let's have a look at it because there's several components to it. So operationally, the contact center monitors and meets with specific, clearly specified standards. Standards, you can also use the term KPI. And the world-class contact center needs to achieve that better than 85% compliance with those standards as an organization. So have a look at your operation and decide what are those standards, what are those KPIs that the organization itself needs. And I'll give you some guidelines on that in a few moments. The second level of that is standards as defined by internal and external customer expectations and customer feedback. So we need to be very careful that we are monitoring exactly what it is that our internal and external customers expect of our contact center. A lot of contact centers make the big mistake of running their operations based on assumptions, when we assume that the customers need certain things. The next level we need to look at is by specific industry. We sometimes have statutory, regulatory, contractual if we are BPO operation. So some of the examples here: FSB, Financial Services Board, PCI, Payment Card Industry Compliances. Then we'll talk a little bit more about the SABS, South African Bureau of Standards, and or the ISO standards. So there's your second level of compliance with standards. Now, to help you get in line with that, we've put this together. So in 2008, in fact, South Africa became the first country in the world, believe it or not, to have national gazetted standards for the operation of contact centers. And there you see just the covers of those three sets of standards: outbound, inbound contact center, and the last one is back office operations. So those documents are available from South African Bureau of Standards, and I'll give you the link in a few moments. I've never actually stopped to count them, but there must be something like 2,000 different standards embodied in that. A few years later, ISO International actually applied their methodologies, their processes, and used the SABS, the South African standards, as the baseline. And over a period of several years, 64 countries, if my memory serves me correct, participated in an alignment process that created the international standards. So there's the link. You can order them online. They are quite expensive, but you will see the pricing changes frequently due to currency fluctuations. But go online and have a look at that. Then also to help get your standards, your KPIs in place. Here's a document that I compiled several years back, and my colleagues and I looked around the world, and we gathered together into one place in an Excel spreadsheet format 480 contact center KPIs. We drew them from various sources and pulled them together. I'm not suggesting that any contact center uses all 480, but it's a very useful checklist to start working on. And then fairly recently, I wrote a very easy to read, very short ebook, Top KPIs for Your Contact Center. We really look at those 10, 15, I think it is in total, KPIs that really are at the heart and soul of running a world-class operation. So here we see those are just some examples of standards and KPIs. The third component that makes up a world-class contact center is benchmarking. And this is a vital component, because unless we are benchmarking against other operations, we really don't know where we are on the journey. So let's have a look at how do we do that. So the contact center needs to be benchmarked, and we say best practice is at least on an annual basis against national, regional, and international, same sector, and similar non-competitive contact centers. So there's quite a task already. If we're in banking, we need to benchmark ourselves against similar banking operations in our region or in our country, and then internationally as well, just to make sure that we are doing everything in line with world-class standards. And to some extent, a duplication with the previous set of standards, a contact center needs to achieve at least an 85% compliance score against those KPIs that are internationally recognized to comprise best practice for a contact center operation. And there are around about 600 line items or check items in any contact center that form the ecosystem of that whole contact center. And we need to be able to audit against that and to benchmark against that. So there you have it, the three necessary components of a world-class contact center: aligned with the strategic vision of the organization, running at 85% or better against the organization's own defined expectations and KPIs and standards, 85% against best practice, and it is benchmarked on an annual basis. So this is not an easy journey. If we go to the next component, and what comes out of doing these exercises is the knowledge and the understanding of exactly where our call center is on this horizontal line. Are we a fundamental call center? Are we a developing call center? And of course, once we know where we are, we know what we need to do. These are simple reports that come out of it, audited overall score, and there you can see it by the unit or the division within the contact center. How well is each of the components of the call center performing? We can drill down then, for example, and this is one of the work streams that we look at is human capital. So we look at people, processes, technologies, and there you can see exactly how some of those areas within the human capital space are needing quite a lot of attention, whereas others are well matured. It also allows us to start building these performance risk models, and in this particular example, you can see that ideally we would like our contact center to be in a high performance, low risk space, and certainly not in a low performance, high risk. In this example of a call center, you can see there's a cluster in the middle of most of the operation. It's sort of doing all right, but down here the processes are particularly bad in this particular operation, and therefore dragging down the entire operation. So those are just some of the tools that come out of an auditing methodology. We can also, if necessary, use a tool like it's called Snapshots, which is a global benchmarking tool which allows us to benchmark our contact center against around about 3,000 other users worldwide. And as you can see, there's our own score here. You can see that first column against the global benchmark score. So that's how we know how well we are doing or not so well. In our next webinar, which will be sometime during August, I haven't set a date and time on it, be looking at exactly how to assess, audit, and benchmark your call center. But if you're interested, in the meantime, I have written an ebook on exactly how to do it. It's quite a lengthy process, but if you feel like doing a do-it-yourself audit on your call center, this little booklet will give you the guidelines on it. But please feel free to just register for the newsletter, in which case you'll be updated on the dates and times for the next webinar. And also remember, 29th and 30th of July here in Johannesburg will be probably the last masterclass for 2019, and those are the subjects that we will be covering. So that really takes us to the end of this particular discussion. I'm trying to keep it as brief as possible because I know everybody is really busy and can't really afford to be away from their workstations for any length of time. So that really is the end of it. Unless there are any specific questions, please use the chat box there on your screen and raise any questions, or feel free to email me and I'll be able to answer them specifically, or if necessary, let's hook up on a Zoom, a live meeting at any point in time. So let me know, and I do hope you enjoyed this little session, and we look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Are there any questions? Feel free to put it in the chat box right now. And if not, let's just bid you well and have a wonderful day. And thank you very much for joining us today. I do see a chat happening here. Thanks, no more questions, but thank you very much for joining. And there is a recording available of this webinar. If you do want it, just please email me, rod@rodjones.co.za, and I will give you the link to the recording for this webinar. Thank you once again, and have a wonderful week. Goodbye.